the thing that changed communication the most for people was air conditioning. And why? Because before that, houses were built that there was no air conditioning. So people sat on the front porch to get a breeze. And that's how they became social with their neighbors. With the invention of air conditioning, what did we do? We all went inside. And as people have gone from, I own a house on a block to townhomes, multifamily units, what happens? You pull into your garage, you shut the garage door, you live in your house, you rarely know your neighbors.
Welcome back to Blessings, everyone. I can't wait to bring you in on this cool conversation today with the man who has unlocked the secret to mastering the art of the most important skill set you need to be ultra successful in all aspects of life, and that is communication. My guest, Brian Galke, discovered that he could eliminate social anxiety and improve his interpersonal skills by reading other people's faces. Our facial features naturally connect to certain personal traits and characteristics about us. And there is a reason why the devil is always depicted with the sinister smile, the downturned nose, and the pointy chin. And Brian is here to explain that.
Yes.
Becoming an expert in what he calls subtle skills, because no one has to know that you're doing this, has helped him to skyrocket to success in his own career and put him in the room with giant industry leaders like Alex Hormozi. He teaches people all over the world how to acquire the transformational skill of facial decoding to promote compassion, connection, and confidence, and to expand personal and professional fulfillment. So welcome, Brian Galke, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I want to take you into your early life, and we'll go through the progression of your timeline a bit, but I want to ask you something deep to start.
Sure.
What does connection actually mean to you?
Being more in the moment than in your own head. So I grew up as an introvert, and we can get into that here in a second, but I spent a majority of my life in my own head instead of in the moment with people. And that's what really changed things for me. And it wasn't until I was in 2010 that my life really changed, because I was too busy overthinking things and being in the prison of my own mind while I was in the public setting. And people confuse the fact of, oh, you're an extrovert if you're out, but actually I was an introvert. And so I was out in public because I like to be around people, but I was terrified of being around people at the exact same time. So what connection and communication was to me was actually being present in the conversation and in the moment instead of being trapped in here.
I think that's a skill everybody needs, right?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people.
It's more needed this day and age than ever before. If we were to go into just younger people this day and age, they grew up with this fantastic device here, and they grew up in the age of perfection. So I can create the perfect text message. I can create the perfect email. I can order food without having to see anyone. I can order a date without having to see anyone. So they say that for younger generations, they have the same social anxiety of a face-to-face communication as people my age have for public speaking. And that is getting up and standing in front of and potentially being judged by 5 to 5,000 people is scary. They have that same anxiety level with a face-to-face conversation, because everything they grew up with was perfected and crafted. I grew up before caller ID, when we just picked up the phone and said hello. And we had those conversations on the fly. It's a matter of rearing. So I have a young daughter. She'll take pictures. I don't like it, delete it. I didn't have that choice. We took a picture, sent it off to Kodak or Eckerd's, and hoped it showed up good in 2 to 3 weeks. So it's a different world they live in. We went to the movies one time, and they were showing the previews, and she's, I don't like it, next. That's the world she grows up. Everything is on demand and at a choice. So they're not used to facing difficult discussions.
Wow, that's so true. And also, I think kids are naturally exposed when they are interacting online, which is a lot of them are doing the majority of the time. And they are naturally exposed to potentially thousands of people, and they live with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what an interesting concept. I never thought of it that way. Wow.
There's a few movies that you can reference. There's a movie called, I think it's Strictly Business, that one of the guys talking about when he grew up, when you were bullied at school, it stopped when you left school. Now people become cyber bullies. If you have something that happens to you, it doesn't stop when you leave the location. It can forever live on. Text messaging, social media, you name it. It's a different world and a different environment now.
It sure is. Wow. So where were you born, Brian?
I was born on Laramie Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So I was an Air Force brat. And we moved to Texas when I was 4 years old.
Okay. And what did your family look like?
And so my parents divorced when I was two. Mom remarried my stepdad when I was four, hence the relocating to Dallas. So I have a mom and stepdad. Then I have two half sisters. Then I have a dad and stepmom and three half brothers.
Oh,
So
wow.
I am the
Okay. So you're
original.
you're the original. And are you close with everyone?
I'm close with the sisters more because I grew up with them. So because my dad was Air Force, he moved around a lot. They settled in Florida. And so now once you become 16 and you work and things of that nature, it's harder to meet up. So we try and get together once a year. I became closer with my oldest half brother a few years ago because he started traveling to Dallas once, I think once a quarter, once every other month. And so when he'd come into town, he'd come in a little bit early and we'd go to dinner and we'd catch up. So thanks to FaceTime, text messaging, you can create those bonds that I didn't have growing up because growing up, they were people on the other end of the telephone. So we've been able to build those. And I grew up with my sisters. So with them, they're a natural part of my family. And then with the brothers, it's more like a distance family that I've gotten to know more over time thanks to technology.
You said that you were an introvert. And so can you take us a little bit into your life as little Brian, like in elementary school? What did that look like for you?
Sure. So it was one of those, I knew I belonged, but I didn't feel like I fit in. And so going into school, I just did things a little bit differently. For example, I didn't wear jeans until junior high, I don't think, because in Texas, way back then, you had to wear pants. You weren't allowed to wear shorts. And it was so hot in the classrooms all the time. If I wore sweatpants, I could pull the legs up. I guess it's a cool hip style now. But back then, that's what I did. So I didn't own my first pair of jeans till like junior high. And I always had friends, but it was one of those of, do I deserve my friends? Do I belong here? So it was an interesting place to live. We grew up when video games became popular. So what do? You either go out and you play in the backyards. We either at somebody's house playing football or soccer or something like that, or we were riding bikes. And back then you just had to be home before dark. And that was about it. So luckily my parents lived in a very nice neighborhood that when I say nice, it was a great location for kids. It was younger families. A lot of people who moved in had kids around the same age. So your friends were a couple houses up versus I know a lot of people who grew up in major cities where you don't have that. So, for example, where I live now, I live in a townhome. And here's an interesting side fact for you. The thing that changed communication the most for people was air conditioning. And why? Because before that, houses were built that there was no air conditioning. So people sat on the front porch to get a breeze. And that's how they became social with their neighbors. With the invention of air conditioning, what did we do? We all went inside. And as people have gone from, I own a house on a block to townhomes, multifamily units, what happens? You pull into your garage, you shut the garage door, you live in your house, you rarely know your neighbors. But I grew up in a great suburban neighborhood where I had multiple friends. It was like a circle eight. So I had some friends on this half the circle, some friends on this half the circle that we could all ride bikes and went to, and they were all around our same ages. So you got to grow up with a group of friends. Now, there's a 6 year difference between me and the next closest sister. And then there's a almost 15-year difference between my youngest sister and I. So the way that I earned money to get a car, turn 16, was I babysat my youngest sister when I was 15
Oh, and you got paid for that.
over the summer. So that's how I spent my summers was babysitting. So I knew things like how to sterilize bottles and all that kind of stuff when I was a kid.
Oh, those are great skills. And
Yes.
it sounds like you had a lot of friends.
We did. Built in the neighborhood with being kids get along. Sometimes kids don't get along, but you still have your core group of friends. Matter of fact, I have a text message with two of the guys that I've known since kindergarten, maybe if not that early elementary school. Now, do we hang out? No. Do we keep in touch? Yes. And that's one piece of advice, has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today. But one of my favorite things is if you pop to my mind, you're getting a text message because you never know why did they come to mind. So if I see something that reminds me of my childhood or a certain person, they're getting a text message from me. Now, it's a bonus if they respond. It's just when you come to mind, you're going to get a message. It's just the way I
That's
operate.
Oh my god, that's beautiful. That's
Mhm.
a great piece of advice. It has everything to do with our conversation because it's about connection and
Mhm.
communication and that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. I love that. So, what about then when you started to get a little bit older in high school? What kind of a teen were you?
So I was a despondent teen. And when I say that, I didn't go through your typical high school or college experience. I went to junior high. One of my best friends who's like, hey, I don't want to play football in high school. I'm like, okay, I won't either. So we went to one day of practice and we decided, screw this, and we stopped. So we didn't do that, but I wanted a car. And I came from a good middle class family, and you had to buy your car, earn money. And so one of the deals was I babysat my sister, then in trade for the truck that I got later on, but I had to find a job. I thought I wanted to go to school to be a doctor. So what I did in high school is I did co-op, which was I went to school from 8 to noon or 1, and I left at lunch, and I went and worked at the hospital for 4 hours a day. And so I started in respiratory. Well, and it was basically sitting in a little closet, and it was cleaning the equipment that came in. So ventilators, changing out cannulas on patients, what goes in their nose, which changing out trachs, which I had to learn very quickly that if you're changing someone's trach, stand to the side, because if they go, things fly across the room. Luckily, I was never hit by that. So I didn't go to pep rallies. I didn't go to football games because I was already at work when all those things happened. And so while it was very educational because I thought that was a career path I was going to go down, I didn't have the true high school experience. So then that limited my exposure to other people as well, because I had to find people to hang out with after work when sometimes I would be getting off work and those people would be going to work. So that started some of my introvertism. And one of the things I started doing is I started picking up books on like body language or how to win friends and influence people. So what do good introverts do? They figure out, I'm going to figure out how to study things. So that's what I did. As a matter of fact, you can see Janine's book here, which we'll talk about in a minute, because you were at the same event that Janine and I spoke at. But if I
Yes.
were to point to the bookshelf over here, I've got tons of body language books, statement analysis, things of I wanted to figure out how do people tick because I didn't understand it. I felt like I missed that day at school where they taught like, here's how you become friends with people. And what I realized is it's more about proximity and finding commonalities. But at the time, I didn't know that. I just thought, okay, I'm missing these conversations. And as I mentioned earlier, I love to be around people, but I would sit in the corner and not really talk to anybody. I lived in my head a lot when I was young. And that's part of being an introvert and part of being cerebral. Even at times, what I love about decoding faces or body language or stuff like that is you can gamify it instead of, so if you start getting stuck in the moment, you're like, okay, how do I bring myself back to the present? Let's do these things. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. For example, what would be one of the things you could do to bring yourself out?
You can pay attention. So what I learned on earlier is what can you pay attention to somebody that's different? So it was clothing, right? Oh, hey, what are they wearing? Why do they wear it? Because people choose their clothes because that's how they identify themselves to the rest of the world. But you can look at animals like peacocks or whatever. You're choosing your feathers that you want to show people. So that's why some people go through a goth period. So I'd make a game when I would travel places like, oh, who is this person? What's their story? Then you'd watch their body language. I love going out to places like for lunch. I would sit at the bar. Why? Because you can talk to the bartender. And then people who sit at the bar want to be social versus if you go sit at a chair by yourself, then people think you want to be alone. And I always picked careers that people had to come to me. So I was a server, I waited tables, I worked retail, I was a bouncer, bar back, you name it. And then even when I went into technology, I went to help desk. Why? Because people have to come to you. But so it always made it a game to like just try and figure out who people were. The challenge of figuring out who people are is how many questions can you ask where people know you're interested versus people feel like you're stalking them. And sometimes I didn't know that line. I would ask a lot of questions like, why are you interrogating me? And I'm like, oh, I'm just curious about people.
So this started when you were a teen, basically.
Mhm.
Okay. I
Seeing,
love that.
being, especially if you are a bouncer, you have to learn to watch people's body language to figure out who's going to fight, who's not, what's really going on. Here's just a quick tidbit for anybody. The people who are really going to mess you up aren't the people who are going to go on and on about how they're going to mess you up. They're the people who just do it. And so you'd always know if somebody started to square up, I'd pay more attention to that than somebody who's running their mouth. Because a lot of times it's the little dog with a big bark but no bite. No, if they know that they can destroy you, they don't tell you what they're going to do. They just do it. And so that's where
That's
kind of
true.
body language, situational awareness. If you're a server and you're carrying a tray full of stuff, what do you have to do? You have to constantly look around for who's going to bump into me. What do I need to move around? How heavy is my tray? You pick up a lot of skills in addition to conflict resolution, active listening, because you're taking people's orders. I think everybody, if they want to be a well-rounded person, wait tables, work
Yes.
retail, so you can experience other people and sometimes understand what an a-hole you may have been prior to working those. And how do you deal with those difficult discussions, those bad, let's say I was bartending. How do you cut off a drunk? When somebody comes in, they can't do it, and you have to do it in a nice way because you want them to leave with, look, we've all had one too many. So you don't want to berate them, make them feel bad, but you have to, hey, I can get you some water. I can't give you any more drinks. Matter of fact, how are you getting home? Are you driving? So you have to learn how to deal with difficult people. Or if you're a server, you don't cook the food, but your tip relies on how well does it come out of the kitchen. So if it comes out bad, how do you handle that situation? What do you escalate to a manager? How do you resolve it? What can you do to the people to enhance their experience? Because you're only really an order taker, and then you come by and check on it afterwards. And you're just hoping the people in the back. So what do you have to do? You don't have to just win over the customer. You have to keep good relationships with the people in the back who are helping to take care of you at the exact same time.
Wow, that's so much. And it's really digging in deep to things we don't even really think about, but we're all unconsciously doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you were conscious of these things as you were a teenager.
I just paid above average attention to things like growing up. I've just always had situational awareness and a built-in GPS. We were talking before we went live here. I used to sell technology to jails and prisons, but I started on the help desk and then I learned how to build them. Then I would actually go into jails and prisons and actually install stuff. And I have a kind of an interesting mind of, if I walk somewhere once, I can get back there. Now, don't ask me street names. I can tell you it's by the McDonald's or turn right here and go left here. Names elude me, but physical surroundings do not. So if I've been somewhere once, I can usually get back there again. And it's the same thing for people. I probably pay an above average amount of attention to who comes, who goes, where am I? And it's just part of how I'm wired.
That's really interesting. It's making me think of a couple of things. One, I remember this test that we had, I think it was in high school, where you had to look at a picture and see how many things you could remember from the picture after only having looked at it. It was like a police scene awareness test for if you witnessed a crime, what would you actually remember? So I bet you did really well on those tests.
I did. And like I said, it's weird how my brain works. So, for example, I can tell you where we were sitting and what was on the table, not to a T, but what was on the table with where I met you at, including
Do you,
almost seating positions.
do you think that's because you are a visual learner, or is it
Oh,
more of an, are
100%.
you?
Oh, yes. I'm
Okay.
extremely visual. I will hang up the phone and say, okay, I'll see you later. I am so visual. When I was married, we came up with a system because she was auditory and I was visual. If I'm going to the store, you better text me what you want because I will hear you, but I'll come back with 3 of the right things and 5 of the wrong things. So she had to text me when I was going to the store. If she was going to the store, I would want to text her and she's just tell me. So I would just tell her. So we had to come up with a system of how do we work well together when we're accomplishing things.
That understanding of another person's style of communication is a big part of your work, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. What really changed it for me was meeting my mentor in 2010 and learning that people's facial features tell you a bit about them, like how to talk to them, how do they take in information, how do they process information. And it was the first proactive skill that I'd ever met because I mentioned body language books. That's great, but you have to have a conversation and wait and see if their body language changes. But this was from the time you're walking up to talk to someone, their face tells you a little bit about them. And here's the crazy part. Your audience right now is probably going, oh, this is BS. But we talk about faces nonstop. We say, take one on the chin. We say, keep a stiff upper lip. They've got sunken in cheeks. They've got an eye for this. They're all ears. They've got a nose for this. Keep your nose to the grindstone. We talk about faces nonstop. And because we were forced to read so many books as a kid, how did authors describe characters in their book? Through their actions and through their facial features. Because back then, men wore suits, women wore dresses. We didn't have all these things that we could expand upon. Now we can talk about what style of shoes. Is it a stiletto? Is it a red bottom? Is it what designer did this? Back then, you just had clothes. And so the only ways to really describe characters were through those two means. And then in addition to authors, artists also took the exact same classes in what's known as physiognomy. So they could learn to draw heroes versus villains. So that's why you can turn on any Disney movie or open any storybook, Cinderella, you name it, and you immediately know who's the hero, who's the villain, who's going to take care of you. We've been trained our entire lives. You just haven't been formally trained. But here's the really crazy part, because you said earlier that you were a teacher. This was taught in the education system until Henry VIII said, I don't like the idea that beggars and thieves can misuse this for ill will. And he had it yanked out of the education system. But physiognomy used to be taught, and it's a skill that goes all the way back from the Greeks. And it used to be part of the education system until he had it yanked out.
Oh, that is so interesting.
Mhm.
Physiogamy. I'm going
Physiognomy.
to definitely do a deep dive into physiogamy
Yes,
to learn a little bit more about that. And I have some questions for you about that actually too.
sure.
But I'm wondering, you wanted to be a doctor, and then you started to get into all of this body language decoding and facial decoding. So what happened with college? What did you
Actually,
study?
so I wanted to be in medical until I worked in a hospital. And that's why I am a huge fan. Yes, I missed out on the high school experience, but I started in a career that I knew wouldn't be my career because of that experience. So I
Mhm.
mentioned I started in pathology, or sorry, in the respiratory cleaning equipment. Then I moved to the warehouse because I got to deliver all the different stuff from the warehouse off the loading dock into it. And I got to talk to all the different departments. So I was curious about people like, why do you want to work in pediatrics versus working in here? And everybody had a story about why they liked working in that wing. And an example of that is why pediatrics. Pediatric nurses said, because this is the only place in the hospital where people want to get better. So kids just want to play. So their recovery time, as disheartening as it is to deal with kids with issues, kids are the ones who want to get better. They're happy to see you. Adults become big babies when they go in. Oh, why did this happen to me? Oh, F you, all these kind of things. Kids just want to play. And so they were always happy to see him. So I went from that. And then one day I was walking through the hall. And because I delivered all these places, people knew who I was. And somebody said, "Hey, do you get grossed out by blood and guts?" I said, "Nope." They said, "Okay, do you want to work in pathology?" And I'm like, "Well, what's pathology?" Pathology is a doctor has to look at every single thing that comes out of the human body in surgery, in ER, you name it. So I went in, I was in, once again, a small room, but these tubs would come in and they look like little, I'm going to date myself here, like Jello gelatin tubs, the little rounded tubs, or like a butter tub. And inside of it would have a part of the human body. And I've seen everything from eyeballs to teeth to things that came out of people's bodies to you name it. And that part was good. But what I realized is walking around the hospital, it's what I call ball kickers. And ball kickers are, it's such an unhappy place. Most people walk around like they're looking to kick a ball the whole time. And what I realized is I don't want to be in that environment. I'm very susceptible to my surroundings. And I realized that while so many amazing people can turn off that emotional attachment, I couldn't. If I saw somebody walking in pain, I winced. And I realized this isn't the career for me anymore. And I had no freaking idea what I was going to be. And somebody said, "Well, you're good with people. Why don't you go into PR?" I said, "Okay," because I used to be a big time follower. Somebody said, "Go do it." I said, "Okay." And that's because I really had no direction for myself. And so I went to school for a college. I did a junior college first because I couldn't afford it to do the whole thing. My parents helped me a little bit. And so I lived at home, did 10th, 11th, I call it 13th, 14th grade. So after high school, that's why I said I didn't have the college experience because I did that. But then I had to work full time to go to school. So I bartended, which got me around people. But there's a difference. When you're hiding behind a bar, you have a barrier, right? This is my bar. You're in my place, as I shake the whole camera. And so you have a level of confidence that take me out of the bar. And I'm like, oh crap, I don't know how to talk to people again. So again, what did I do? I went back to body language books and other things. So I took courses like body language was one of my courses. I ended up, the college I went to lost their accreditation for media. And I'm like, crap, I don't want to graduate with an uncredited degree. So what else can I graduate with? Went and met with my counselor and they said, you can graduate with communication studies. I'm like, you mean the one that the dumb people take? And because that's what I'd always heard. Best thing that ever happened because I took classes in body language again and statement analysis and learning about people. There's a really funny story called the Nice Arena. And if you read about it, it said that women, in order to attract their mates, they paint their faces. And as you read through the story, I'm going to ruin it for you. Nice Arena is American spelled backwards. And it was talking about all the things that we do and we take for granted that if we were an outside perspective, it's like, why do women put on makeup to attract a mate? And we do it with clothing and all these things. It's a really cool book to read. But I found I was in love because these were all life skills that I could use. But when I graduated, I was still clueless. So I graduated. The number one college recruit at the time was Enterprise Rent a Car. I went and worked there. Once again, learning to deal with people. It's really funny. People had more respect for yes, I'm going to date myself, a Blockbuster video because they would take it back to the store versus they would call them and say, come get your effing car. If they couldn't find it, they would abandon them at the airport. People getting mad because they got hit in an accident. It's not their fault. Now they need a rental car and F you. And so you learned how to deal with a lot of different personalities doing that job as well. So I just ran into careers that put me in front of people. And what I found is I was always fascinated by people. And I loved being around people, but I still had to study them to feel like I belonged.
And so now that you are a master of all these skills, do you feel like you belong?
Oh, I still at times I'll walk into a room and I get nervous. And that's the difference is now when I start to get nervous, instead of just sitting in the corner, and don't get me wrong, sometimes I'll still do it.
Yeah.
I start looking around the room at faces and I think, how can I build a connection with that person? What do their eyebrows tell me? What is their eyebrow height? What is their eyebrow shape? What does their eye angle tell me? And then when I'm focused on you, I'm not thinking about me. And it's
I
also,
know. I'm like, what are you seeing?
yeah,
Do
well,
people get nervous around you because they know that you're doing this?
they do. That's why it's called subtle skills. You never have to tell anybody what you're learning. So it's really, you mentioned earlier, it's called face reading. The only reason I call it decoding facial features is because as soon as you say face reading, people are like, ooh, can you read palms and things too? I'm like, no, I don't know if that works or not. But what I learned was a very valuable skill. As a matter of fact, I keep the book. So this is my original book from 2010. It's got a new name for it now. Now it's called The Power of Face Reading is his new version. But I went and I met my mentor in 2010, and I would drive 2 hours, 1 hour each way, twice a month to go spend time learning with him in a group setting. And when I met the guy, I actually thought he was full of crap because my friend called. She was in town for a trade show. She said, let's go to dinner. I show up at the restaurant. She calls, hey, I'm not going to make it. Here we go. So, no, you need to come over here and meet this guy. I said, no, I'm at the restaurant. I'm where we agreed to be. I was being stubborn. And she said, you really need to come meet this guy. I said, why do I need to come meet this guy? Because he reads faces. And I go, oh, yeah, let me rush over there for that one. And I said, no, I'm going to stay here. But she finally convinced me to go. But now I had another plan. I was going to go prove that this guy was a fraud because I'd read enough books on magic, mentalism, anything that he kind of taught me about people. So I thought this guy's going to use generic statements that apply to everyone reading a horoscope. And when I got there, he was such a, you ever meet those people that just radiate, I'm a good person?
Yes,
That was this
absolutely.
guy. That was Mac. And I thought, God, it's gonna be really hard to hate this guy and prove him wrong. But it reminds me like a grandfather, nice guy. And I'm like, but I came here to do that. So we sat down at dinner or like at the bar area, and he started going person by person, telling them about him. And when he got to me, I thought, all right, I'm gonna listen really good. And I'm gonna see, is he repeating the same things he told them? Is this just generic crap? And it wasn't. Instead, it was very specific and it was pretty damn on. Now, is it 100%? No. But is it high 90s? Yes. So I was a little curious. I bought the book and then I started going out there. We did these courses, $10, come out, learn it. He was actually an attorney who learned it for jury consulting. He ended up loving it so much that he decided to walk away from law and teach it to people. And so when you hear his whole story, much like me, he went into law because it was something he could memorize and do, but he was also an introvert and didn't really understand people. So he wanted to study people. And then what he found was this was so effective, he started teaching it to others. Next thing, he just walked away from law. And we still go and have lunch. He lives in Fort Worth. I still live in Dallas, 45 minutes each way. But we go and we hang out. He was just such a great guy. But I would take the book with me. Or what got better later on is he created flashcards. So I help him. My way to pay Mac back is I help him get rid of the flashcards. And in the flashcards, you learn what does it say. And when you see somebody with it, then you flip it over and go, okay, what does it mean? So just like anything else, when you were in school, you read the book to learn the idea, you create the flashcards to nail it. And
Mhm.
so when I bought the flashcards, I take them with me on the road. So I started learning this skill and body language and other things. And it took me help desk to getting a promotion to help build it. Then to actually go in and walk past inmates. When I walk past inmates, what I learned over time is not everyone's a bad person. Some people just made a bad decision and got caught. And I made that same bad decision. I just didn't. Now, there's some people who deserve to be in jails and prisons, have done some really horrific things. But sometimes it's people who had lack of parental guidance, or let's just say guidance as a kid and caught up with some bad things. And then there's some people who just had bad intent their entire life. But I had to learn body language to learn, hey, where should I watch? Watch your six. Who's walking towards you? Because there were some people who had malicious intent and would try and get something off of you, right? Like your pen or something like that, distract you. So I had to learn which way to keep my body language, pay attention to things. But and also then I became a corporate trainer. When I became the corporate trainer, I'm having to teach inmates how to learn information, somebody who's in a county jail. So for people who don't know the difference, you're only an inmate after you've been convicted. Until then, you're just incarcerated, meaning you've been arrested, you're waiting trial, things like that. So you're talking go to a state prison and talk to somebody who's been in there for 30 years and maybe hasn't touched technology at all and have to explain how things work, or somebody who's in a county jail who they're used to having a cell phone or something else. In addition to that, we were training the staff how to use the software. It's a career that takes a lot of physical capacity, a lot of mental capacity, but not a lot of knowledge about computers and electronics. So it's learning, okay, how do I talk to these people? How do I teach them? So a lot of those things help. But what I found was when I was reading their faces, two things. One, I was actively listening and I was figuring out, I know what I want to say, but how do I speak their language?
Mm.
And when that started doing that, I started seeing how effective it was. I'm like, holy crap, this is great. So that was my number one skill. Body language, statement analysis helped me as well, and just general knowledge of things. But I ended up with 10 different promotions. And what I found helped me the most was this skill. So any customer over $1 million, it was me and two other people that were sent in. And again, I never told anybody what I learned. But in the night before, we'd always practice, what's your PowerPoint? Do you have your pitch down? Is your projector working? Is your project working? But what we're missing, that fifth thing, was who are the people in the room? And that's because a lot of times when you do government contracts, it's a blind evaluation committee. So you don't know who it is. Now, if we knew it's a smaller county jail, we're going to meet with the sheriff and the IT guy. I could look those people up on LinkedIn and figure out, okay, are they auditory? Are they visual? Do they want to hear the upside of things? Do they want to hear the downside of things? But if I went into a room, I'd have to adjust on the fly. But you could still do that. And it was a game changer for me because when I'm focused on you, I get out of my own way. But it's like going to another country. I used to be the obnoxious traveler's kid who thought everywhere I go, they should speak English. And if they don't, I'll speak English louder and that's going to work. Now, that's a very obvious way to look at things of how ridiculous that is and narcissistic. But we do that every day because we get so excited about something, we push our agenda instead of think, how can I get them to hear what I'm saying? And so in sales, that's known as commission breath, right? Oh, you can just tell they just want to sell their product versus do they want to see if the product's right for me? We do the same thing when we want to go on trips, when we want to purchase something, when we want to go to dinner and we want Italian and you want Chinese. Instead of trying to figure out, okay, how do I get you? What's the best way for me to explain why we should go to an Italian restaurant? I'm just going to force you to go, we're going. This is what I want. We do that all the time. But what I like to say is with the face comes grace because you start thinking differently. And instead of making about what you want, it's how do we build that bond? And that's what changed my life. I'll share a vulnerable story here in a second, but that is what took me to all these promotions. And I ended up being a regional vice president of sales with a $40 million book of business. And I did that for 2 years and I was miserable. Why? Because I stopped being able to, two things happened. One, COVID happened, so we couldn't go visit clients. And number two, I was on Zoom calls so many hours out of the day that it wasn't fun anymore. And I got fired on November 30th of 2022. And when I say fired, no severance package. They took away our PTO like a month earlier. So 21 and a half years. And I knew I wasn't going to retire there, but you want to leave on your own merits to, hey, you're done. Oh, by the way, we also fired you today. So your insurance benefits expire at the end of the day. And it was gut wrenching, except I had started teaching this. And so after the pandemic, I reached out to my mentor and I said, hey, Mac, this skill changed my life. And he retired during the pandemic. He's up there in age. And he just said, I don't want to take the chance anymore. And so I called him. I said, hey, if there's any opportunities, I would love to be able to teach others the same skill that changed my life that you taught to me. And a testament to Mac was, he said, go do it. He didn't say, okay, you can do it, but you got to trade under my name. Because I said, Mac, you have your own brand. You have your own company. I will help you sell your products, but I want to do things under my own brand because I want to incorporate body language and other things that are in it that I've also learned. He said, go. I care more about people learning the skill than I do about my name being attached to it. And that's a true teacher. Yes, he made a good living. Yes, he traveled the world, but he wanted the skill to be taught more than it be about him. And that's a good mentor to have.
Yeah, definitely. And it feels like your whole motivation behind it is so benevolent. It's all for the good because it's very obvious that this could be used for manipulation. It could be used for kind of evil purposes. Have you seen it being used for those things? And how do you stay on the good side of it?
So it's funny you say that. I used to think I don't want to deal with HR because I never want someone to not get a job. And then I realized that's only looking at things from one point of view. because a company is hurt just as much by a wrong hire as the person who didn't get hired. An example of this, and you may have seen in my slides, SHRM study said the average cost to replace a $60,000 a year employee is $30,000 to $45,000. But on top of that, once you hire that person, the loss to the business is up to $120,000 because you have to take someone else off the working condition to train the new person. So you're actually taking down two positions at once. Mm. And so if you're hiring the right people, or you're making people feel seen and heard and versus being treated like a number, then it's a win for the employee and the company. Mm-hmm. And so that's why before I'd say, I don't want to work with HR because I never want to interfere with someone getting a job. But if you're hired for the wrong job, it's just as miserable for you and the company. And it's not about judgment. It's just about thinking, how do they take in and process information? How can you understand this person better? Is it used in dating? Yes. So I have a course, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Faces.com. And the reason that I created that was during the pandemic, I got so tired of people sending me pictures going, what does this say about them? I created a cheat course. It's $200. And the reason I put that out there was because people went to online dating. Online dating is like putting your resume out there. You put a pretty picture and then you lie about the rest. I don't care about what you say. I look at what facial features do you have in common. So a very simple one is I don't have a lot of upper eyelid. So I'm fine doing things by myself. If I were to date someone who had a fuller upper eyelid, they're a we person and I'm a me person. And so now I know, okay, let's have that difficult discussion up front of, hey, I like to do things alone. If I go do things, it's not a reflection on you. And if I do too many things alone, you just have to remind me to invite you from time to time. I can have that discussion because I see what's on their face versus my face. Or we talked earlier, I'm more visual. If I'm talking to somebody who's more auditory, then I know from time to time, I need to verbalize things and not just let them see it. Yeah. So if you see somebody who's auditory, they want to hear sound words. Hey, thank you. Sounds like what you're talking about. Hey, come listen to this. Leave them voice texts. Somebody's more visual, send them a regular text. Send them memes, send them pictures. If somebody's got this line right here, so it's below the lip and above the chin, that's called the verbal affirmation line. If you see that on anyone, they thrive on sincere verbal compliments. So if you've read the book, The 5 Love Languages, there's time and attention, acts of service, gift giving, words of affirmation, and physical touch. This line right here is words of affirmation. So if you see that on someone, then you can make those words of affirmation that makes them feel seen and heard. So when we had one guy that used to work with us, this guy did an awesome job. And I'm like, man, we need to figure out how to get this guy a bonus. And later on, he came and said, just a sincere thank you from the CEO would have been nice. And I looked, had that line here. I'm like, God, why didn't I not think about this more often? So when you look at people, now there's not one to say, hey, I love money. But if they've got that line right there, then sincere verbal compliments go a long way.
So these are the ways you can use the skills to help to relate to somebody in a good way.
Correct.
And so I know people are asking you about how to recognize traits that they might want to avoid if they're on a date or trying to relate to someone else in another way. So What are some signs of things you might want to avoid, or like red flags?
There's not really any horrible features, not individual horrible features, but there's things I'd pay attention to. For example, I have angled eyebrows. Angled eyebrow people, it's an authoritarian eyebrow. When you see somebody with that, they want to know, hey, what's my angle? Help me understand it. That means they also want to be involved in the process. So that's one thing. But if they also have a downturned nose, if you think a nose is like blocking down so that I only have air for me and none to share, look at any Disney movie. You see a lot of villains that have downturned noses. So if you think of, oh, they're blocking their air from everyone else, what I've noticed in people is I'll ask questions. And if you see that on someone, they're okay, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. So the ends justify the means. So they want to be in charge. The ends justify the means. And if they have a pointed chin also, that's like stabbing their way to get what they want. So if I see all three of those, I'm going to pay attention. I'm not going to necessarily judge them, but I'm going to pay attention to their actions and go, is this somebody I align with or not? Now, because not every facial feature is 100%, this is just a go and look, try to understand them, and then pay attention after the fact.
Mm-hmm. You can go out. Feel for the alignment, for the alignment, which is a nice way of putting it. So it's not you're going to be judging someone, but you're looking at their facial features and then also interpreting their body language and their other things about their behavior in order to make that determination. So
I'm going to pay more attention to it. Yes.
Yeah, you're going to pay more attention to it. I cannot help but thinking how this might have all come into play in your personal relationship
Mhm.
or how people in relationships function when they have very different characteristics. How did this play into your life, and does it bring a relationship down to have totally
No,
different?
it actually lets you have those conversations. So I mentioned earlier, if somebody has a very full upper eyelid, they're a we person. And if they're dating or married to somebody that has a very little eyelid, then they're always thinking, why don't they ever want to do anything with me? We never get to do enough things. They just don't want to be around me. If you can look at someone and go, oh, that's just the way they're wired, and their face tells me that, then you learn to adjust. And so when I mentioned earlier, with the face comes grace. I used to be so annoyed when someone would interrupt me. And I thought, how dare you? You think that your point's more important and valid than mine. I just get in my own head about it. But what I learned is people with low eyebrows make decisions fast. So when they understand something, they interrupt because they're so excited. They want to help you get there. So rather than taking it as being slighted, I learned to realize that's just how they're wired. And then I went, okay. So instead of thinking, oh, how dare you? I look at it and go, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah. And I think that understanding those characteristics helps you to assume positive intent. If you could just
Yes,
say, it's just data, this is how they're wired. So you're assuming positive intent instead of assigning negative meaning to things.
correct.
This is so fascinating. All right. I have to ask you to look at my eyebrows. Tell me what.
Sure. So what we'll do is we'll make it fun.
Okay.
I'm gonna move some things around. I have a huge setup
Have you
with
been
like.
taking screenshots of me?
I'm going to take a screenshot of it. Okay, so I'm gonna have you look straight ahead and capture. Okay, now I know we're gonna make it more fun. So let me go
Okay.
over to
I'm a little nervous.
screen share. Oh, you're fine. Can you make it so I can share screen?
I have to make you the full host, so you'll have to take it off after.
Yeah, as soon as we're done, I'll give it right back. I will seize power temporarily.
I know you've been waiting to do that.
That's right. Okay. All right. So can you see the picture here?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about a few different things.
Okay, so before you start, I just want to mention to people this is on YouTube. So if you are listening on Apple or Spotify or your podcast platform, go on over to YouTube later to see this exercise that we're going through because it's really fun.
All right. So we're going to draw a few different arrows here. And I'm going to do two more here. Let me change. Then we're going to knock these out one at a time. Okay. So I know I drew a lot. You're like, okay, this is really weird, but this is where we're going to start. All right. So what we can see from here is you have rounded eyebrows, right? So that's the first two arrows that you see. Rounded eyebrow people think about the people around them first and themselves second. So if I come telling you about why this is, you're going to benefit from it, it's all about you, you don't hear that. But if I were to say, oh, this is how it can help you with your friends, your family, your coworkers, you make it about the people around them first and themselves second. And when you do that, helps people that have rounded eyebrows. So I like to give the example. So when you see somebody who has rounded eyebrows, I think about the people around them first, themselves second. So I give the example of if you've ever been on an airplane, they come on, they say, in the event of an emergency, please put on your own mask before someone else's. They say that for rounded eyebrow people. And that's because they think of others first. So if you start talking about how they're going to win, they're going to benefit, they're like, I don't get it. But if you start saying this is how your friends and family are going to benefit, they're like, okay, I'm in. Or it could be your coworkers, you name it. So you saw the presentation in Nashville, and that was about how Elon Musk and Oprah. So people love, hate him. I never would have known when I posted that about the two of them, man, some hate came out about that, especially Hawaii and Tesla and all kinds of stuff, and Twitter.
Oh my
But
gosh.
if you think about Elon, people are like, yeah, but he's Elon. Everybody knows who he is. Yeah, but where does he invest his money? So he was frustrated that how long banks took, so they created PayPal. He didn't just benefit from it. We all did. After he made his money in PayPal, he invested in Tesla. Back then, Tesla wasn't really known. So he invested all of his money into a company to create electric cars that could fit him and his five kids. It wasn't about him. He could have retired and just gone speaking right after selling PayPal. And then what did he do with Tesla? Invested in SpaceX. So everywhere, it's what they say is where you pay is where you pay attention. Where does all of his money go? Into things that help other people. The other one is Oprah Winfrey has rounded eyebrows. What do we know about Oprah? Who she interviews and what she does for her audience, right? If you have to read up on Oprah to hear what a horrible upbringing she had, and it's amazing that she is who she is because she could not have been. She was molested as a kid. She was abused. She was told she was too fat and ugly to be on radio and TV. But what do? We watch the show not to watch Oprah, but because of who she brings on and what she does for the people in her audience. So rounded eyebrows people, think about the people around them first, themselves second. You, like me, eyebrows start out very thick and see how they thin out. Those are like attention gauges. So the thicker part of your eyebrow is your sweet spot when doing things. So it means you love to start stuff and then you get bored and you move on. If you see somebody whose eyebrows are the same thickness from beginning to end, then you can put them in the beginning, the middle, or end of a project and they're rock stars. Some people have what's known as a managerial eyebrow, which is it starts out thin and gets thicker as it goes. And so you can start talking to people. And if somebody who's got a thick eyebrow that thins out, they love starting things. So if you're selling them a product, you better stay involved early on because they're going to get bored and if not, move on. If they've got the managerial eyebrow, they're going to be slow to start, but then they dig in later on. But yours are more rounded, thick in the beginning, and then they go down. We mentioned about fuller eyelid people being a we person. So you have a fuller eyelid. So if I was talking to you, if I was selling you something, I say, once we got started and when we go do these things, because you like doing things with other people. Both of your eyes angle up. So when somebody's eyes angle up, they want to hear about the upside of things. So I need to start out with the features and benefits. And if I have to deliver bad news, start with the good, work my way to the bad. If I come in with too much negativity immediately, I come in and start talking about my bad day and what went wrong, all this, you're physically nodding and mentally you've left the building.
That's
so
right.
I know I need to start on the positive, and that's this area right here. That's why I drew the two arrows that angle up. So let me move this one up just a little bit. That one was to talk about your upper eyelid. But what you can see, if I get rid of that, look how both of your eyes angle up. So I know on both your personal side and your professional side. So our personal side is where we'd wear a wedding ring, is always our personal side. Doesn't matter, handed, left-handed, male, female, you name it. This is always the personal side. This is always the business side. Both of your eyes angle up, but some people, only one eye angles up or one angles down. But both of yours angle up. So I need to keep things positive when talking to you. And if I have to give criticism, do the sandwich technique. Here's something good. Here's what we need to address, and then leave it on a good note again. But if I'm selling you, I need to sell you the features and benefits. If I meet someone whose eyes angle down, then I need to talk about how our first versions of the product failed, or what did we learn from our mistakes in the past? Because people whose eyes angle down are worried about the downside of things. What could go wrong? So even when I used to sell, and I mentioned being the pro demo team, I would look at eye angles and go, when I talked about the features and benefits, I'd make eye contact with that person. If I had to talk, if I saw that a lot of eyes angled down, I'd say, this isn't the first version of our product. And I'd mention what version it was and what did we learn from our mistakes and from our customers, because that's how you speak that person's language. I'm still selling the same product, but I'm highlighting the way that you take in information. Because if I came in and talked about all the problems we had that we overcame, because your eyes angle up, you're like, why are they telling me the downside, the bad side of things? But if I walked into a room and everybody's eyes angled down, and I'm talking about why everything's perfect and this is the best product and we've never had a single problem, this guy's full of crap. So you just learn, what does it mean? So for you, eyes angle up. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. Next
No,
one
it's
here.
great.
Yeah. A little bit of a flatter upper lip first. So I don't ask you a lot of questions immediately, but when you start sharing information, then I know we're good. So if somebody has a very thin upper lip, so you saw Janine speak and you saw her on stage, she will share information like you would not believe. But as soon as she gets off stage, if you ask her personal questions, she'll say, why do you need to know that? And so when you see somebody, we say the phrase, keep a stiff upper lip. So you don't have a huge abundant lip. You have a medium one, right? But I'm not going to ask you a lot of personal questions immediately. However, if I'm selling you something and I don't ask you a personal question, you're going to be offended. Oh, is this just transactional? But somebody with a very flat upper lip, because we say the phrase, keep a stiff upper lip, means be stoic, don't share their emotions. They can keep it 100% transactional and it's completely fine. As a matter of fact, if I start asking questions like, why are you in my business? So you're what we call a non-read, because I can see it, but it's not an overly abundant and it's not flat. So I would stick to the middle ground there. Then here, you've got that verbal affirmation line. That's that little line right here below your lip and above your chin. So you've got that. And then you've got a good strong chin, so I don't have to walk on eggshells when I talk to you. If you had a very small chin, like I used to actually have a smaller chin when I was an employee. And when the smaller the chin, the more it sounds like screaming when somebody gives criticism. And so we'll actually teach that same sandwich technique we talked about earlier. You most definitely have to do that with somebody who has a small chin. Now, what I didn't cover with you here, and let me get rid of some of these, is the fact like I can't see ears. So people are like, well, why don't you talk about ears? Because I can't see them a majority of the time. Right. So I'm just going with what can I see from this front on picture. And of course, like if we were in person, I could talk more, but you also have high and wide cheeks, tons of energy. You can keep going and going. But other features are hidden. But this is just what I would start thinking. So if I was, let's say I would want to sell you something, I'm going to focus on you think about the people around you with the rounded eyes. I need to keep it positive because your eyes angle up. The fuller eyelids, I would make we conversations. Once we get working on this, is how we're going to work together, explain the we part of it. And then going down here, I need to ask you a little bit of personal questions. Don't get too much, but I need to make sure I don't keep it transactional. And if I have to deliver like bad news about the product or service, I can get right to the point. So this is just how you can look at someone's face and figure out these things about them. Questions?
That's oh, it's amazing. Okay, yeah, my biggest question is how did you get your chin to grow bigger?
It's over time. So I keep it right here. You may remember the fad a few years ago of the Jazzerciser. So this is
Yes.
where people would chew on it. And what would it do? It changed the muscles and made their things go. There's 42 muscles in the face. The mind creates movement, creates muscle. So we are constantly going back and forth and doing things. So when our parents said, stop making that face or get stuck that way, there's some truth to that. So as you learn to take one on the chin and deliver bad news and things, you actually start doing this. So you raise your chin. Or if you've ever seen somebody in their discussion, they do chin extenders like this. As you do things over time, your face can actually change. So you can see someone who started out as very timid and shy. Chances are they have a receding chin or a small chin. And it's that they've had to take one on the chin. It's almost like muscle building up, and your chin can get larger over time. When you see all the muscles underneath the face, it's pretty amazing to go, okay, this is constantly changing over time.
My immediate thought is there are going to be a lot of ladies who are going to want to know how to change the shape of their faces.
You already do it.
Like,
You do it with makeup today, right?
but yes, but I'm thinking about things like you're getting rid of your jowls.
So jowls
Is this
actually,
possible? Is this possible?
jowls it would take plastic surgery to get rid of, but you don't want to get rid of them because they're what they're known as power pouches. And so what that is that's from having to take one on the chin while also gritting your teeth and holding it there. That's what creates those. So you see those on CEOs, royalty. So while you may personally be like, oh my gosh, I don't like having it, it actually tells other people that you can handle a lot and stand your ground.
Oh,
Yep, I know.
that's a
Uh,
good way to reframe it.
but it's true. All right, so I'm just going to go and show you a few of these. So this is what it looks like on someone's face. So if you were to take the skin off, not like a Hannibal Lecter way, but you get the idea. These are all the muscles. So our faces are constantly changing over time. I mentioned the guy who changed my life. There's Mac. But what I want to show you, and you saw this when we were in Nashville, is this is me at uh, 18
Oh,
versus 38. So see, my ears used to stick out away from my head more. You can see this line right here is called a heart line. I didn't have that when I was a kid. So for people watching, that's this horizontal line in your ear. It's a little bit harder to see on women because you don't know, did they wear
oh,
really heavy earrings that created that? Or is it that line? So it's like a little line just goes like a, what do you call it? A
yeah, like
backslash?
a crease. It's like a
Yeah, a
crease,
crease.
but
Yeah, a crease.
isn't that really associated with potential heart
Oh, absolutely. You
issues?
can you
Yeah.
can Google Heartline and that's there, but you don't always have it as a kid. You can eat like crap. You can run into you don't work out enough, and but that's your body telling you, hey, you've got something going on. What else do our faces do? Our cheeks will sink in when we're sick. That's why we can look at somebody and go, ooh, what's going on with them? If we work ourselves too hard, an eye right here will puff. So
Hmm.
depending on if I'm working myself too hard, this side of my eye will puff out. And it's our body literally trying to block out you so you slow down because it takes away your vision. If I'm pushing myself too hard personally, it blocks it on this side. So our bodies are constantly changing and adapting and sometimes telling us like, hey, pay attention to this.
So
And
changes in your face are reflective of things that are happening in your personality.
absolutely. So it's what's known as epigenetics. 60% of of who we are today is what we inherited genetically. So parents, grandparents, you name it. But there's something known as epigenetics, and that is outside influences from the day we're born. Every single thing that happens to us can affect us on a certain level. So what we're born with is, if we're lucky enough, we're born with sight. We're born with a fear of heights and loud noises. From that point, everything becomes external. So it's the rearing versus raising. You can take identical twins, same genetic code, raised in the same household, but they had different life experiences. And so they made different faces. And that's what'll change it over time. Let's say one was really good at academics and the other one wasn't. One's really good at athletics, the other one wasn't. The other one's good at relationships, the other one wasn't. Each one of those things will be reflected in their face. So you can take identical twins who should look identical, but there'll be subtle little differences in their face based on what they experienced in life.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've ever
Yes.
seen someone who has left a bad relationship, either personally or professionally, and you see them there, you're like, you look like a different person. They are, because they started smiling. And when you smile, you raise all these things up, versus when you're upset, you do this enough and your mouth becomes downturned. And all of a sudden you start smiling and your lips will turn from downturned mouth to upturned mouth. So our faces are constantly a reflection of where have we been and where are we today. It doesn't predict the future, but that's why we don't recognize somebody in an open casket, because all the muscle tension's gone. Or if you've ever seen someone who has had a stroke. So this is the interesting part. People are like, there's no way that you can have a personal side and a professional side. Yes, I can, because it's right brain versus left brain. That's why when we have a stroke, only one side falls. It doesn't fall from here to here, and then the rest of our face is fine. One side of the face will droop because that muscle tension is gone. It's also the reason why you have to go back and get Botox done. So if you've ever had Botox done, you have to go back and get it done over and over again, because that muscle memory is so strong that it comes back and once it pushes out the poison, and the muscle goes, okay, I'm back.
Wow. All
Yeah.
right. This is pretty fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. So that
So interesting.
one last one, just because you talked about earlier, you already know how to highlight certain things in your face
Yeah.
because you put on your makeup every day. Now, this one's going to blow your mind, or at least it blows most people's minds. You put on your makeup with yourself in the morning, but you never see it the rest of the day. Instead, it's put on to tell other people what parts of you to pay attention to.
It's true. I was thinking about this as I was putting on my makeup this morning. I was thinking about this because I used to wear makeup every day,
Right.
regardless of what my plans were for the day. And after COVID, I stopped wearing makeup every day. I only put on makeup if I am doing an interview like this or seeing
Yes.
people for a social occasion. I don't even put it on to go to the store
Right.
anymore like I used to. What does that say about us,
It
about
just
me?
says you're comfortable in your own skin. You don't have to highlight something because you believe in who you are. And so that's the whole reason that it's highlighted is, take, for example, much older women. Okay. Before they had the number one plastic surgery right now is lip enhancement. But look at some older ladies like in nursing homes and stuff. They'll actually draw in bigger lips than they actually have. So if you go up and look, their lips down here, but their lipstick is over here, because subconsciously they knew the larger lips are seen as more attractive. That's because this is your personal lip. This is your professional one. So when you have a fuller one, people are drawn to you and want to talk to you more based on that upper lip. So
Okay, I
yeah,
love it.
yeah, women have been using makeup. Like the one of the ones I'm trying to get in the door with is Mary Kay. And it's because they're based here in Dallas. I'm like, listen, I can tell you why you're putting the makeup in the certain places. And so that's one of my 2024 goals, is to get into that industry, because a lot of women are putting on makeup based on how they were taught versus what they want to highlight. So why not?
Exactly. Hey, you can tell people how to apply makeup to highlight the features they want to portray.
Yes. So this other picture,
Wow.
this isn't my daughter, but we had a face painter at my daughter's birthday party. And when she became a tiger, not only when she put it on, then she ran around going rah everywhere,
Yeah,
but everybody treated her by what they saw on her face. Makeup's
that's
no
so
different.
true. That is so true. Wow. Okay. There's so many mind-blowing things. I can see why it's so fascinating for you.
Uh-huh. It absolutely changed my life.
I can't believe it. All right. So I do have a question for you. I know we could just go a few more minutes because I have a couple
Yeah.
questions I want to ask you. When I was going through and thinking about this, I was thinking about something called the baby schema, which is the way that a baby's face, whether it's a human or an animal,
Mhm.
is set with certain characteristics like the larger head, the rounder face, the big eyes. And the reason why that's important is because babies are cute and that those features make them cute, which makes us want to take care of them and not kill them. So
Or-
that kind of thing is really fascinating to me. So the way that your facial features or the features of even an animal face make other people feel about us is really interesting. So
Yes,
what can you say about that?
you're 100% right. Why are all babies born with large, rounded eyes? Because that's the only way they know to take in the world. They don't
Mm.
understand sounds. They can't make language. So what happens is as that kid grows up, what are they more drawn to? Are they still a visual person like me? Do they have a preference for sounds? Then their ears can grow. Once they learn to make noise or take in the world, if they like that, then their mouth will grow. If they're more
Mm.
hands-on physical, then this area right here is like the sign of a kinesthetic hands-on learner. So below the nose and above the lip, the wider it is, the more physical touch they are, the more physicality. That's how they learn things. So do I learn it by reading your PowerPoints? Do I learn it by listening to you talk? Or do I need to put my hands on it to really understand it?
Now, do
And
you
so
think that develops because of something innate, or is that something in their environment that causes those different areas to develop?
it's a combination. So it's genetically, what are you born with a predisposition to? Is that the right word? Uh,
Predisposition.
predisposition. Thank you. But you get to make your own choices, and you're
Mm.
called to some things that you don't like genetically. I can't play. I am tone deaf. Tone deaf. I almost didn't graduate college because I was going to fail songwriting. I thought I can write rhymes. It's easy. I can make things match, but I couldn't acoustically hear the differences between the notes. My daughter is an audiophile. She loves music and singing and dancing and all this kind of stuff. And she's on key. You don't want to go karaoke with me at all. Not only can I not hear the music, I can't hear my own tone. It's bad. I can get up and talk. I am happy to be a speaker. Put me to music. I will clear that room out faster than anybody. It's a combination of what do you learn? What do you have experience to? And what calls to you?
Yeah.
I believe my daughter isn't as visual as I am. She's probably visual, but she's more of a kinesthetic, hands on. She loves to Play Doh, to draw, to do things, and she loves music. She'll eventually learn what's her best way of learning this stuff, hands on, or does she like to listen to it? Now, what I
Mm.
do think changes things a little bit is kids get to learn so much through their tablets now that, okay, I'll go opposite of my generation. We grew up with books and along came Audible. They grew up with learning things audibly, but watching them physically, and tablets, they get auditory and visual. So I'm
Mhm.
curious to see how many will change towards more auditory visual strictly because of electronic media. So you look at where Facebook or Apple's going with the Oculus. That's only for
Mm.
visual people, right? Because you're
Mhm.
going to be doing
Mhm.
things and moving things with your hand. So it could change that when we see more visual learners over time, but that's going to be, again, epigenetics. They may have been born with a predisposition towards being auditory or hands on, but as a society, we're moving to visual.
Yeah,
So,
wow. It's really fascinating when you think of those wider implications like that. Has
mhm.
anybody ever hidden their true nature from you?
It's hard to tell because, again, this is just how do you take in and process information. But if you want to understand someone's nature, you need to watch micro expressions, body language, and statement analysis. And examples of statement analysis, a good book to read on that is this one right here, Daniel Lieberman. It's a mind reader.
Okay.
So deciphering what people really think based on how they say it. For example, if I said, "Oh, what's Mitzi?" versus if I say, "Oh, it's Miss Campbell," or if I say, "Oh, it's that woman." Right. So each of the same way. I'm talking about the same person, but if I use your first name, it says bond or we're
Yeah.
close. If I say your last name, it's affiliation, association. I know who they are. If I say that woman, it's saying get away from me. So you
Yeah.
pay attention a lot more to people's body language and what they say more so than what does their face. Because the face just says, are they auditory? Are they visual? Like people ask, can you tell who's a liar and who's a cheater? No, not at all. Because there's nothing on the face that says that. But
Mm.
I would pay more attention to their body language, their micro expressions, and their words.
Hmm. Yeah.
But to
Wow.
answer your question, yes, absolutely, because I want to see the good in everyone, and not everyone's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Oh boy. All right. One last question, and then I want to hear about your lessons that you've learned through all of this, because I'm sure there are many. But I want to know, and I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to know this. If you're going to a party or walking into a room, maybe a place like a conference, a place where you want to impress, how can you go in there and portray with your body and your face that you are magnetic, that you're just
Sure.
going to be the most confident person walking in there?
Shoulders make a big deal. Slumped shoulders say, oh, I'm not confident. wide shoulders, walk in like you own the room, and have a wider stance. When we create a stronger base, we seem more confident. A great book for that, as I'm sure, is Janine Driver's You Say More Than You Think. This is a book that you video yourself and you say, what am I saying about myself, from what do I wear to how do I walk into a room? Now, not so much on what you wear, but how you wear it, right? Is it baggy? Is it loose? But when you walk into a room, do you slump down? If you've ever seen a dog in trouble or a kid in trouble, what they do, they try and shrink down. So if we walk into a room and we shrink down, we look like a victim, or we look like we're hiding from something. So if you're familiar with fight or flight, actually there's a third one. It's called freeze. And it's when you try and you either stop moving or you make yourself smaller because you're a smaller target. So that's one way, is make sure that you are open, keep an open body posture, right? Not as wide as this. Don't stand while you're doing jumping jacks, but keep your palms noticed here. And then, so we trust open hand gestures, and we trust people who talk with their hands. So I'm bad about sticking one of my hands in my pockets. I try and remember to pull them back out. Definitely don't have both hands in there. And I know you can't see me, but if you see both hands in your pockets, think like a little kid. Okay, this is what's going on. But shoulders, wide stance when you walk into a room, and dress as yourself. And what I mean by that is, you're either going to see me in a black V-neck or in a vest everywhere I go, because that's who I am. When I've tried to go and don the whole full suit and jacket and stuff, I don't feel like it's me. I feel like I'm playing a role. Now, I used to have to wear suits for presentations, but the reason I got into vests was by accident. And that was, I can't wear suit jackets because I just sweat my butt off. So I learned, if I have the 3-piece suit, I can take off the jacket and I still get credit for having a jacket.
For having a suit.
Yes. But then I would just keep the tie and the vest on, and it got to be known as my brand. And now when I go to places, I just went and crashed an event with a guy who does viral videos. And a funny story, I'll tell you about him in a minute. But because I walked in a vest, people are like, you're the guy that decodes facial features. I'm like, yeah. So you can take that and then it becomes your brand. And when I put on my vest, it's my bulletproof vest. Nobody can hurt me. So dress as to who you are and what makes you feel, quote unquote, sexy in your own skin. Because that makes a huge difference. Now, there's nothing wrong with trying new styles, but figure out what's yours and be you. Don't try to be anybody else.
Yeah. All right. Perfect.
What else was it? What was your other question?
My final question is about all of the biggest lessons that you have learned. So what stands out for you through all of these amazing things that you've just told us? There's a million things people can take away from this to improve their lives. So I love that you've given us all that. But what are some of the biggest lessons for you?
Go because you can always leave. And what I mean by that is, you never know what opportunity is there. So I was actually going to do a post about this the other day, and I didn't. Give things a chance, because it's only one letter that changes. That's going to be redundant when I say it. You'll have to change one letter to go from chance to change. And what I mean by that is, if you take a chance on something, you never know if it's going to change your life. I have to swap out as the C and the G. So go because you can always leave. Take that chance because you never know where it can lead, what it can do. The other one is, only imposters don't have imposter syndrome. And when I say that, the scariest thing I ever did was to say, this is what I want to do to the world, because people knew me as, oh, he's successful in this industry. And when I said I wanted to teach this, I worried about being judged. And so waiting to press send on that first post to say, this is what I teach, and worried about what other people thought. Look, people are going to hate on you no matter what you do. There's more people who want to support you when they find out you're doing something you're passionate about. So I just did a gig the last week for a school with a guy I haven't seen in 30 years, but he went to school with me. He saw a picture of me and Mark Cuban, and they said, what's this guy doing? And they reached out and said, will you come and talk to my group, my team? I'm like, yeah, this is a guy that gave me an opportunity that if I didn't put it out there, it never would have materialized. So the more people will show up to support you than will to tear you down. And the people who are going to tear you down will tear you down no matter what.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I was forced by being fired to do something I love. So this first year has been a financial struggle, but it's been freeing in so many other ways. I don't have high blood pressure anymore. I'm happier. I can sleep at night. When you're doing something you love, I always heard that, oh, just do what you love. And look, figure out how to make it pay. Let me put it out there first, because I had to cash out a 401k to give this a shot.
Yeah.
But the things I've gotten to do, the people I've gotten to meet, the places I've gotten to go, because I took that shot on me, We're taught as employees, be a good employee, let somebody else determine your value. F that. You get to determine your own value. There's a great book right now. I'm actually listening to it on Audible called The Gap and the Gain. And it's, are you focused on the gap of what you think you don't have? Or are you focused on the gain to look at what you've accomplished? Stop putting this, I can only be happy once I've done all these things, and start looking at what should I be grateful for that I've already done today. I have a picture up in my room that the minute I get up every morning, are you familiar with the second line, like in New Orleans?
No,
Where
I'm
they,
not.
okay. All right. So a second line in New Orleans is a party that's meant to celebrate something. Usually it's for weddings. Sometimes it's for funerals. Sometimes it's for birthdays. And occasionally it's even a divorce. So you hire a band and they take you through the street and it's a marching band and you just follow behind them and you celebrate something. I have a picture of an artist that is based out of New Orleans in Florida. And every day when I get up, the first thing I see is that second line photo. And I think, okay, what should I have? What should I be celebrating today? What should I be grateful for instead of thinking about what I don't have? We all want to be in better shape. We all want to accomplish more. We all want more money in the bank. But if you get up and you start with gratitude, you attract more things to you than you do in the past.
Yeah. Love that. All of that. Those are great. What
And
are you the most grateful for?
opportunities that fell in my lap. I've met some amazing people. I get to do some really cool crap. I was going to say the other word, but I don't know your audience.
It's okay. We do swear occasionally on the
Okay,
show.
good. Then I'm gonna do it real fast. I have some really cool friends. I've got to do some really cool shit. And it's just you have to be open for it. A buddy of mine that I've known since elementary school, he won a trip to go to the UFC. It was called the Ultimate Dream Experience. And even though he watches UFC with his neighbors on a regular basis, we watched it in college. So he called me up and he said, hey, you want to go to this? Now, I was still a full-time employee and I had a trade show to go to, and I could have said no, but I said, I'll figure it out. And so when you just say yes and figure it out, you'd be amazed what falls in your lap. And the other big aha is stop investing in only other things, a new car, a new house, invest in yourself because jobs will come and go. Like I said, 21 and a half years out the window. I'm not the only one. I did a post. You can go look me up. I'm Subtle Skills on pretty much everything, but I'm Brian Galke on LinkedIn. I did a post about being vulnerable, about what it was like to get fired and what at the 1 year mark of from November 30th of 2022 to 2023, that was the most interaction I ever got because people feel shame. If a relationship doesn't work out, if a job doesn't work out, you name it, start being vulnerable, share where you're at. Because number one, there's a lot more people that will support you than you think. Number two is maybe somebody else needs to know that they're not alone.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
hope that's a good way to end it today.
Oh, it's a perfect way to end it because that's really one of the missions I have with this show, the Blessings podcast, is for people to be able to see one another, to know that they're not alone, so we can relate to one another, make connections. Everything you do is just so aligned with my mission. And so thank you so much for being here. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that most easily?
Very easily. Subtle Skills is the easiest way. If you want to download a cheat sheet, look, this one I couldn't believe it was available. Just go to getthecheatsheet.com. And
Ooh.
if you go to that, you can download everything we talked about today: eyebrow height, eyebrow shape, eye angles, you name it. Go out there and practice it. And then look, the company's called Subtle Skills, but it seems like people can't spell subtle. So give it a shot.
You should have misspelled it. You buy the domain with the 2 T's.
I've got it multiple ways. I thought this is the best name ever until I realized people can't spell. So yes.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian. You've been so
Thank you.
great. I loved it. And thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad we met.